Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. As usual, to interact with us, you can send questions or comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 172, Smelling. You know me, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia. I'll hand it off to Jason Richards for his introduction.
Hey everybody, Jason Richards here, Worshipful Master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, and member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C.
All right. And a small group tonight. Last but not least, we have the newest host of the Masonic Roundtable. That is Mike the Intern. Mike, introduce yourself, please.
And I'm Mike Hambrecht, Junior Steward of Village Lodge in Burton, Ohio.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Mike. All righty. So let's see. We had a little time off when the 4th of July lands on our regular show night. A lot of us have family obligations to include fireworks. So that's why we didn't see you last week. Hope you enjoyed a repeat of episode 21, I believe, our America episode. Otherwise, hope you had a happy 4th of July if you're in the States. So
I would have been able to make it, but nobody else wanted to.
No one wants to hear you talk to yourself. Let's see. So we have a little bit of news to catch up on, the least of which is the show we did before was a recap of our 300th celebration. And just as a reminder, if you celebrated the 300th anniversary of Freemasonry, we'd love to see pictures. We have an ongoing Google Photos album where you can just join in and upload at no cost to you. And you can find that at bit.ly/T, R 300. That's bit.ly/TMR300, all caps, because we'd love to see how you celebrated your event. We have some pictures from Nicholas Lane and UGLE, and just it's been great to see what went on that one historic day just at the end of June. Next up in Masonic news, we have a video of the Masonic pub crawl. When we did a quick recap of a late April meeting of Masonicon, that's right, where the folks in Attleboro, Massachusetts, invited a few of the hosts, specifically Robert Johnson and I were able to get out of the house and go up there to participate in a great event. They've finally been doing a lot of post-processing of the videos they've been capturing. They had video cameras everywhere. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the Masonic pub crawl presentation by Robert Johnson, you know, it was great because I had heard that he had put this presentation together and was he had never shared it with me. And so I heard it live at the same time the folks at Masonicon did. And he did a really good job researching the tavern origins of, you know, North American Freemasonry, and specifically which taverns, which lodges, who was first, you know, what they were doing. Were they part of the Tea Party or not? It's hard to say. And even we had the pleasure, this is kind of a behind the scenes thing, as we were touring the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, Robert was asking the Grand Historian there specific details, trying to get, you know, data on the spot right before his presentation of who was where and all that. So it was really fascinating to kind of see the sausage get made, which made his presentation even better than it already was. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out for some Masonic education by our very own Robert Johnson. Next up, we have Alexandria, Washington 22. We've covered this about a couple months back now, where the historic Alexandria, Washington Lodge 22 in Alexandria, Virginia, right at our very own George Washington Masonic National Memorial, had recently had its charter arrested, and you know, they're trying to work through the issues to really kind of get things rectified. So the good news is that this Thursday, the new Worshipful Master designee, Michael P. Bible, will be installed as the new master of Alexandria, Washington 22, along with a couple other Lion officers. So,
yeah, the secretary and the senior warden designees are also being installed. And I think the entire Grand Line is going to be up there. I know, if nothing else, most Worshipful Stuart Cook will be there.
okay. So that's good to see that things are getting back on track, that the charter hasn't been completely, suspended or arrested permanently, but, hopefully this is a path towards getting things on a more stable path. All right. Next up, we have an update on the Milwaukee Masonic terror suspect. Mike, what can you tell us about this article?
Well, this guy, first off, he's been locked up since January of last year when they caught him. And ever since then, he's also been trying to get a defense of claiming entrapment. And it seems like he's actually requesting to be allowed at least out on bail pending his trial. Because basically, I believe the length of his he would be, even if he was sentenced for the crimes he's supposedly committed, he'll be in jail for 25 months. And by the time he actually gets, by the time he actually gets to trial, he'll have been in there 25 months, and the sentence is only from 24 to 30 months anyway. So it's almost like he might as well get out. But on top of that, just from everything I've read about his particular case, it sounds like he could have a real good shot at the entrapment. It was informants, not actual undercover agents, that he was constantly talking to. Yes, he tried to actually buy the guns finally from the undercover agents, but the guys that were that got this whole thing started were informants, and informants usually are paid, which they're paid for results. So they do whatever they can to get results. I'm not saying that that's the case, but that can happen.
Okay, I was trying to figure out the entrapment part of that. And I can see where the defense is going on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like I said, he had, the guys that he talked to, originally he supposedly only went to them and said, I want a handgun. And they said, well, don't you really want a machine gun? And then, so if we get you a machine gun, what would you really want to do with it? How about doing something with, maybe with the Masons, and, that's kind of the way that what I've read about it has come up. So.
Okay. Interesting. Well, let's transition from Masonic news into our topic this week. With the exception of last episode, we're going to continue our 5-part series. We started with 3, and you know what? We said, let's keep going. We're going to try and do all 5 senses. And
the person whose idea it was to actually go through the 2 lesser senses of human nature is not here tonight.
Juan, we're calling you
on.
So I hope you're streaming this live as you're driving back from Key West. This is going to be a harder one, and we said, let's start with the 3 easier ones, the ones that we as Masons revere, the sense of touch, sight, and hearing. And so now we're going to transition into the sense of smell. So, Jason, where does the sense of smell appear in the ritual as it stands in Virginia?
Well, actually, in Virginia, the sense of smell starts in the field out back of the lodge where the goat is tied up.
And boy, does it. For months and months.
And then it continues in the candidate's preparatory room. So the sense of smell really comes down to one symbol in the Masonic ritual, which is the pot of incense. That is really the only place that that Masonry, at least as far as Blue Lodge Masonry, um, gives any credence to the sense of smell. It's the pot of incense is an emblem of a pure heart, which is always an acceptable sacrifice to deity. It glows with fervent heat, and our hearts should continually glow with gratitude to the grand architect of the universe, for whose blessings and comforts we enjoy. That's a bit of a paraphrase there, but really it's interesting because the pot of incense, as we see it as a symbol in the Masonic ritual, doesn't necessarily have any explanation as far as the olfactory sense of incense. Really, what they're talking about is what we can see with incense, which is really the pot of incense glowing with heat, as opposed to the smells it induces. Um, so it's very interesting to take a look at how Masonry treats a symbol where the sense of smell should be primary, and it actually pulls it back to behind the scenes in favor of one of the three most excellent senses of human nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting in that context. It's really alluding to the use of incense in the religious use, right? When you look at how it's being used in Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, and the like, a lot of it is less on the olfactory senses, but more in the ascension, the burning of the vapors, right, that are arising. And so I've seen different readings and metaphors that try to say that, like the smoke rises up, so should our spirit be ascended. And so I think that's more what it's alluding to in its use, right? As a non-religious sectarian approach in our system of morality. Mm-hmm. Now, Ham, do you have some other quotes from different texts on sense of smell as it applies to Masonic symbolism?
I do, and back to the Blue Lodge though. At least one of the lodges I've been to here in Ohio, they actually burn incense before the start of lodge to create an atmosphere that actually separates the lodge from the profane world, so that when you walk through that door, you can actually smell the difference, as it were.
So, I mean, can I ask, is it a TO lodge, or is this just a lodge?
It's actually just a regular lodge. Now, I know that that's a TO lodge thing, and I was trying to look for more detail on that from TO, but no, this is just
Andre
a lodge.
Bellybow's lodge uses incense, by the way.
Okay. And this was a lodge down in Canton, Ohio, that had done this, not New Philadelphia, but another one down there. That after a visit from a brother from a TO lodge in Central Ohio, had mentioned it, they actually burned the incense to create that atmosphere difference, and they also sang, but that's going back to a different sense.
So it's interesting to note that in my research, I've found the assertion that the pot of incense is actually a strictly American invention. It's not actually used as a symbol in the English work. There are those who actually attribute the pot of incense to Thomas Smith Webb, as part of the greater Prestonian work. So it's interesting that it's another thing like the G that is perhaps purely an American invention in Masonry.
I thought there were no innovations in Masonry.
I said invention, not innovation.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, so Mike, share with us some of the text you found.
So one I found here most interesting was the sense of smelling, like other senses, is capable of education. There are many professionals and avocations for which its education is extremely useful. The tobacconist learns to discriminate with great nicety odors, the difference of which is not readily discerned by the unpracticed. So do the manufacturers of drugs, the distiller of perfumes, and many others. The grocer derives great advantage from the education of this sense, as it can aid him in determining the quality and value of the goods. The highest uses of its education, however, are probably, as in the case of the sense of tasting, in the profession of the physician and the chemist, and these uses are the same nature as in the case of that sense. In other words, they can help determine what something is. And I found that interesting, and that it's a really good way of describing what our senses, how we can learn to use them to our advantage. Another good quote here was, "Poets have always made much reference to the delights of this sense. These are associated indeed in memory to all of us with many of the most pleasant scenes of life, with the landscape on which we have gazed in company with departed friends, or the garden in which we have loved to walk and meditate, with the voices of children, the song of birds, the flitting of butterflies in the bright sunshine, the hum of bees, and the merry music of the sparkling stream, or the soft voice of the little waves of an almost tranquil sea breaking the shore." And almost got a little too poetic there. Now, this last one is actually from British Freemasonry, 1717 to 1813. It was actually put in place to describe how all of the senses are used in Masonry, and explain them. Smelling, with regard to the organ, is an impression made on the nose by the little particles continually exhaling from odorous bodies with regard to the object. It is the figure and disposition of odorous effluvia which, sticking on the organ, excite the sense of smelling. And with regard to the soul, it is the perception of the impression of the object on the organ, or the affection in the soul resulting therefrom.
Wow, so we've heard some great poetic explanations of the operative sense of the act of smelling, as well as symbolically what it does to us. Jason, thank you, Mike, for looking that up. That was
Sure.
Great passages. Jason, what have you found as far as your research for this show?
So, interestingly enough, there was the talk about the American invention of the pot of incense as a Masonic symbol. And, as far as smell is concerned, one of the things that I found was on a little bit of the psychology of smell. And of the five senses, smell is the most closely associated with memory and mood. So, the source that I found says that, neither sight nor sound, um, the emotional part of the brain doesn't respond nearly as much to sight and sound as it does odor. And I mean, if you think about walking outside and walking past the trash, and you get a real visceral reaction when you smell something bad, but at the same time, smell can also be a crazy trigger. You could smell something that you hadn't smelled in 30 years, and it automatically just takes you back to a memory of your childhood. And so, in a lot of ways, using olfactory cues like incense and other odorous applications, it could really be a something that could, spark a hearkening back to your initiatic experience if it's used in the degrees as well as in lodges. So, part of me wonders why we don't use more smelling cues in the degrees, because if you want to capture a moment, I think jogging someone's memory by a sense of smell is an amazing way to be able to do it.
Mhm. That's great. I'm already like thinking 2 steps ahead. Like you could have like a cedar smell for 1 degree. You could have some sort of like rubbish or you know burning kind of smell. Oh, that'd be awesome. Um, so let me pull the thread on what you started there, because my research came to the same conclusions. And so um, what I want you to do, if you're driving, but if you're not driving, close your eyes, and I want you to picture these things in your mind. Like remember that moment when you walked into your grandmother's house on Thanksgiving Day, and that bouquet of aromas that hit your senses of all the different types of food, right? That still sticks it into your brain. Remember like the first day of school when you just came back from summer vacation. The school had been cleaned all summer, and you had that sterile scent of cleaning agents applied to a freshly waxed floor, ready for a new school year. Right? Those memories should be coming right back to you, or even as you became an adult, walking into your favorite dive bar. Right? That the smell of the greasy food that you've come to be accustomed to, or if you're old enough, some of the lingering haze of cigarette smoke as soon as you open the doors, right? It sticks to your clothes, and you really can't get it off until you take a good shower and wash those clothes. Or even just the mere sense of smelling freshly cut grass in the summertime, right? Over a summer breeze. Hopefully all these things are invoking a memory, or something, a similar experience that you may have had, and that elaborates on the point that Jason was making, that we have a connection of our olfactory senses and a memory. So while it's very similar to say, but biting into a lemon, people will, if you picture it, you'll start to salivate. Same thing. We can remember that smell. We can remember where we were, which I think is fascinating, location-wise, where we were. And so that had me do a little bit more research on where the psychology of our olfactory senses came in, and then how we can apply that to Masonry. So one thing I found was really interesting was our olfactory nerves, right? That when we smell things, they are very closely connected to our limbic brain. Now, the limbic brain is the primitive part of the brain. It's the emotional part connected to emotions and memory. Okay, so when we smell things, it's literally just very closely separated to that part of our brain. And what's fascinating is the opposite. It's not true that we don't have a connection of the other senses to that part of the brain as easily. So when we smell something, it immediately gets connected to the emotional and our memory. So we can not only remember senses or where we've been when we smelled certain things, but then the feeling we got, the emotion that came with that. So I think that's really neat how those have been paired together. And a lot of this is backed up by behavioral studies and science too. There were people that went underneath of fMRI machines to see, it did what Jason said. Was that true, that the sense of smell, smelling trash, incited more of a response in the brain? Did it light up the brain more than just seeing a picture of trash? And yes, that was proven to be true on multiple times. Another interesting quote that I found was that that they also induced a feeling of, quote, being brought back in time. Right. So a lot of those examples I gave earlier about, you know, your first day of school or going back to dive bars, that it brings you back much quicker. And so if we try to think about remembering your initiatic experience, right? If there were olfactory triggers, right, that we could then bring people back to remember their initiation much better, that would hopefully leave a more lasting impression in that initiatic experience we've been talking about for many years. So I think that was kind of fascinating. And what else? And so that's really the summary of kind of what my research came up to, is that separating the neocortex brain, the logical thinking, reasoning brain, from the emotional, primitive reptilian brain, smells do much better to trigger an instant response emotionally and physically than, say, reason and thinking through some of the other senses we've talked about. So I found it to be fascinating because I thought smelling was going to be kind of boring in my research, and found that to be a very interesting psychoanalysis link to the sense of smell. What are you guys' thoughts on that? It stinks.
You go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So then really the next step is, how can we apply, if this is true and it's backed up by, you know, all these scientific studies, how can we apply the sense of smell going forward, whether it be in ritual and lodge or even in our daily practices? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's dead air tonight.
I don't know. So I did think of one. I'll prime the pump. Where, for those who meditate, right? Meditation is kind of becoming more into the mainstream, at least in the area of mindfulness. And as was alluded to in that lodge example of having the incense in the lodge, you know, be a separate space from, you know, the social hall, but doing the same thing for those who meditate helps create a consistent, repeatable space, right? That once you get in that zone, you're able to focus a little bit better because, you know, you're including all the senses to include smell. So I think that's an easy one to apply for those who meditate.
You know, along those same lines, when someone gets the right sense, for a good example, citrus is usually quite able to heighten focus. It's actually recommended to help kids with ADHD as well for their focus. I mean, it's not going to overcome the need for some of their medications, but that sense, if they get that just a little, and it's not even, you know, tearing open an orange, it's literally just smelling the outer skin of the orange might just be enough to help with their focus. And it's that same idea with separating and allowing that same environment to be repeated and allow for focus.
The same is also true for lavender. I know there's been multiple studies showing that the smell of lavender helps to relax and calm the general population. Me, I hate the smell of it, but so it wouldn't work for me. It would actually make me uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean that and mint, right? Those smells will put people in a more calmer mood, which would be great, right? If you really wanted to go, you know, full, you know, scheming, right? If you would want to set that smell of lavender before maybe a conflict, right? You know, you're going to have a confrontation with a coworker or something like that. Maybe you want to have some lavender scents in the room, so you calm the level of the engagement right from the start. That's a life hack.
Not a bad idea. Maybe they ought to just float that into these prison riots occasionally and see what happens.
Pepper spray laced with lavender.
That's it. But no, I think that's not a bad idea. If you know that there's some kind of conflict you're going to have, or if you sitting down to have a discussion with someone you think you might argue with in a little more heated discussion, it might not be a bad idea to burn some lavender or have some mint in the air.
All right. What else you got, Jason?
All right, let's see. Social media is quite quiet tonight outside of the chat next to the YouTube video. Go check that out. That's a lot of fun. That's really all I've done as far as research into the sense of smell goes. Back to you, John.
All right. Well, I think we might end up making this one a rather short episode. I'm sure there's many other areas we could go into. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So go ahead and jump in on the Facebook page to go add to the conversation. But let's start with Jason to start wrapping it up and bringing us home.
All right. So we've covered the 4 out of the 5 senses of human nature, as indicated in the Masonic tenets. So this one was interesting. Again, nothing that is specifically foundational to the Masonic experience, but I would argue that the sense of smell definitely could be. And so, if we were more open in lodges to using incense as part of the ritual, I think it would make for a heightened initiatic experience. Aside from those of us like me who absolutely hate incense. But it's
remember it because
yes, would definitely remember it. And any time that I smelled it in the future, of course, my eyes would start burning. I'd start hacking, and I'd remember back to my Masonic initiation. Because it's nothing like a good old Masonic initiation to make you cry, or remembering it to make you cry. So thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate it. We'll be back next week with the sense of tasting. And hopefully Juan will be here for that.
Yummy. We're going to make him do all the work.
Yes.
Okay, Mike the intern.
So I do like the idea of a light incense to be burned in the the lodge itself before because like I said, I experienced it at that one lodge, and that was actually quite interesting. It was very light smell. I mean, I doubt that it would actually disturb too many people. It might. I mean, some who are very sensitive, but like I said, it was very light. They lit it, and then it was kind of sent it up the air and then put it out. So I think that's a wonderful idea. I actually think that it would be great for at least the entered apprentice degree, for it to be there, because that's one of the, being the first one, in my opinion, it could be the most memorable if it works that way. But because you're so nervous, you're so charged emotionally and everything, sometimes that gets lost in those feelings too. So adding something like a scent to that might actually allow brothers to pick up on that better. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I really look forward to tasting. Maybe we can come up with something like barbecue for that.
Barbecue at lodge.
We're not going to talk about Masonic green beans.
Had to go there. Well, I was really fascinated with a lot of the benefits to psychology and memory, especially because we as Masons try to appreciate the art of memorization, and if there are tricks that could help that, and to include the sense of smell, then all the better, especially to anchor a initiatic experience as well as to recall it later. But I wanted to also kind of let you know a little bit of behind the scenes. Often you'll see me light a candle in the background. So these are usually scented candles, not like some, rose or lavender smelling things. We did more manly scents. But I've turned that into a little bit of a ritual for the show as well, to kind of light that, an hour before the show and get some of that smell as well, to put me in that mode to get ready for the show. And then when I drink a beer, I usually have, not just a very watery beer, but more of an IPA or something with a lot of hops to it. And the combination of, this manly smell of this candle and the hops and the aroma that comes from that really puts me in a repeatable mode for contemplation. And I found myself, when I'm not on the show, if I'm doing, reading some books or studying or looking up some other Masonic topics for fun, I will default to kind of get some of those same beers, get some of the, maybe even light that candle, to just put myself in that right mode and that right mood. And it helps, especially for recollection. So is it all in my head? Is it all psychosomatic? Probably, but it works for me, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I hope you find an olfactory technique that helps you in your Masonic journey. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.